All right, welcome everyone. I learned two quick things that I'm going to share with you in just a second. First, though, the topic of today's talk is how to make even the most premium top shelf offer seem like a bargain. So this is going to be all about positioning, and it looks like we are live. Awesome, awesome. So I learned two things real quick before we get into the content. I learned two things today. One is, and this is for you iPhone users, I'm assuming that there are people on Android where this is also the case. If you have your phone, because of course, as you know, you can hold your phone in a vertical position. You can also hold your phone in a horizontal position. If you have, and on iPhones, you can lock the orientation of your phone. Okay, so I had my phone locked in the vertical orientation, but of course, when you are wanting to do a video, you want to have it in a horizontal position. But I forgot that I had set the lock. So I'm trying to go live, and it just keeps saying over and over and over, like, you cannot rotate your phone while doing a live video. And I'm going, well, I'm not rotating my phone. My phone is sitting right here, not being rotated. But it was angry because I had my phone locked in the vertical position. So that's a little tip for any iPhone users, and presumably it's the same on Android. I'm sure you can kind of lock the orientation of your screen. So if you're ever going to be going live, make sure you don't have that lock. So that was number one thing I learned. And then after that, number two, I guess I was in a spot with inadequate cell phone reception. So I drove around, I found a spot where I've got 5 bars, and I parked. So here I am. Now we can finally chat. I apologize for the delay. Again, today we are going to talk about how to position your offer, your top shelf premium offer, so that it seems like a bargain, a steal, an absolute must-have. And really what we're talking about is there are a lot of different ways to describe this process. There are really kind of 3 techniques that I'm going to share with you guys for how to position your offer. Because really what it comes down to, it's all about how an offer is framed, right? It's all about how the value of the offer is framed, and it's all about how the essentially comparison and contrast to that offer is also framed. Because again, everything is point of reference, right? So like when someone goes in Barnes & Noble or whatever bookstore, maybe you're on Amazon, whatever, you expect a book to have a certain price, right? A hardbound book might be $15, might be $20. That's your expectation, right? If you went in and all the books were like $100, you'd be like, whoa, what's going on, right? That's not conforming to your expectations of how much a book should be. So priced conditioning is a huge, huge thing. And of course, when it comes to education, right, like here at Elite Marketing Pro, we are in the education business, and a lot of you are also educators, and you are teaching folks, right? And so you need to position, because education is one of those very price elastic things, right? Like a webinar, sometimes webinars are free, sometimes they are not free, right? Ebooks, sometimes they're free, sometimes they're not free, right? All these things, there's a lot of elasticity in the price of information, right? But information, despite the fact that there's a lot of free information out there, information is probably like the single most valuable thing, right? Resource or asset, like, across the entire world, right? Like what do, there are plenty of examples, right? But I mean, think about any kind of patent, think about any kind of, very prized, expensive medication, or even just intelligence, right? I mean, what do governments want, right? They want intelligence about what other governments are up to. And that's the most prized stuff, right? So information is very valuable, so you just have to make sure, of course, you're positioning it in such a way that it is valuable. Now, this actually came up initially, and this is kind of going to be point number 1 I'm going to share with you guys. This came up, I was at No Excuses this year, and I was having a conversation with Vitaly, and we were talking about college educations. And it's something that we probably don't think about that often, because having a college education is a fairly common thing, right? At least having an undergrad is something that a lot of people have. There's a large percentage of people, I think it's somewhere around 30-40% of everyone in the United States, for instance, has at least a bachelor's degree. Okay, so it's a pretty common thing, and it actually has a fairly premium price tag. I don't know, I should have actually looked up to see what the absolute median price of getting a bachelor's degree is, but it's fairly expensive. I know, I have a bachelor's degree. It was a very expensive thing, right? I mean, I spent right around 6 figures to acquire that degree. So that was a very pricey experience, and it was a very pricey education that I received. And of course, I don't regret it. I'm in no way. There's a lot of debate right now going on about the value of the college education. I for one, I'm glad I had that experience. I think it was very formative and good stuff. But you really do, of course, and this is something that instead of it sort of being a default, like, hey, everyone should go to college, there's more of a dialogue nationally right now about how, like, hey, maybe we should really look at, maybe how if this makes sense, essentially, particularly given the current job environment. I think it's a great conversation to have, and I do think that, well, anyway, we don't need to get all into like the politics of education and administrators and how budgets are allocated. That's a whole different thing. Really, of course, what we're talking about here is price conditioning. And that's a huge, huge thing. So when you take, for instance, whatever you having to be, yeah, I mean, Jonas here just mentioned you can make good money with an 8th grade education. That is absolutely true. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because there is no, especially in this space, in the online entrepreneurial space, there is no real correlation between the price of your education, right, and your formal education, of course, and what you are able to achieve, which is very, very cool. There's a lot of opportunity, of course, online, and naturally, of course, in the entrepreneurial community, you have a lot of folks that aren't as traditionally well educated. So anyway, point being, though, really what I want to focus on is just the idea of comparison and contrast. Because when you look at the traditional education that everyone receives, and you look at a lot of the courses that are available to you online, they are significantly less expensive. Significantly. I actually looked up one time, even the local community college where I lived until very, very recently, I looked up just taking a single class in their business department. And it was, I want to say it was just shy of like $500 to take a single class at the community college in their business department. And I'm sure that's a great class. I'm sure the teacher is a great person, may or may not have actual business experience, but there's some things, of course, that the folks need to learn, accounting and then this sort of things, rules and regulations and all that the classroom is a fine place to learn those things. It's important stuff. But we're talking about $500 for a single class at a community college. Now, the average class at a university is going to be significantly more. It's going to be, for per credit hour at a university, I mean, you're looking at thousands of dollars, right? Because, I mean, I know for my education, we were looking at, for a year, I mean, somewhere in the neck of like $25K for a year at my institution. Some are less, right? And some are significantly more. A really top-tier Ivy League education is going to be almost twice that. Actually, maybe even more than that these days. I'm not super familiar with the current. It's been a couple years since I was in college. But the point being, this is a very pricey proposition. And when you compare that education to what you can receive online, the online education is much, much, much less expensive. So to give you kind of another contextual example, there is a restaurant. This restaurant is somewhere in Europe. And what they've done is they've placed a Vespa for sale right outside of their restaurant. Now, this Vespa, I believe it's somewhere between like maybe $18,000 and maybe $22,000 or so for this very nice Vespa, right? So for this cool little scooter. So they've placed that right outside the restaurant, and there's a price tag on it. And what that does is when the patron comes to the restaurant and they see the Vespa and they see the price tag on the Vespa, as soon as they sit down and look at the menu, and the menu is, kind of premium priced at this cafe, as soon as they look at the menu, all of a sudden those items don't seem quite as expensive, and they are likely to spend more because, hey, in comparison, the items on this menu, nowhere near the price of the Vespa. You see this phenomenon in a lot of different places. And actually, while I'm using that example, I'll go ahead and poll the audience, because I know a lot of you are very, very savvy and have probably done some extensive reading in the realm of marketing. I found that story about the restaurant and the Vespa in some marketing book somewhere, and I just cannot for the life of me remember, and I haven't been able to track it down. I've tried Googling it, and I haven't been successful. So if any of you know where I found that story, please let me know, because I've wanted to actually be able to put a little bit more detail and actually mention where that restaurant is and exactly what kind of Vespa. I've wanted to use that, and I just haven't been able to, because I'm like, where did I come across that? Anyway, so that's a little aside. Apple, right? Okay, Apple came out with the Apple Watch not too long ago. and I forget what they're a couple $100, right? And but they also have, in addition to kind of the base models, they have the Apple Watch Edition. And again, the Edition is somewhere, I forget the exact price, somewhere I want to say between like maybe 20 and, or maybe 15 and 20K for the Apple Watch Edition, right? So when you put in comparison the Apple Watch Edition, which is 15, 20K, to just the regular Apple Watch, which is maybe like, I don't know, 350, 450, 550, somewhere in that range, all of a sudden those seem extremely more reasonable and affordable because, in comparison with, 20K, they absolutely are. So this is one of the quirks of the human mind, right? We're always comparing things. So if your prospect, if your potential customer is looking at what you have to offer and they're thinking about like, hey, perhaps you're offering them an ebook and maybe we'll just say it's $100. So if you're offering someone a $100 ebook, right, they're going to say, oh man, well, this is a book. I can go to Barnes & Noble and get a book for $15. What's so great about this book, right? That's the wrong way of essentially framing your value proposition. But if you compare your ebook with, maybe the course at the local community college, which again, we're looking at $400 or $500 for a single course in their business department, all of a sudden your ebook now seems much less expensive, right? And you can use this in any kind of context, right? To get an MBA, right? An MBA, I mean, you were looking, I think, on average around $60,000, maybe $70,000 to receive an MBA. And granted, I'm not saying that an MBA is not a valuable thing, that it doesn't open a lot of doors for you, and that you don't learn a ton, right? All that is true. However, you can compare the cost of that MBA with the cost of an online education, right? That we also offer right here at Elite Marketing Pro, right? We offer a lot of business-oriented education. When you compare the two, compare the price tag, all of a sudden what we're doing, right, seems significantly more inexpensive and cost-effective, right, than an MBA. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the ROI aspect of this comparison in a second. But first, I just wanted you to kind of think about the distinction between someone's expectations, right? People have certain expectations, right? They look at an ebook and they think, oh, this should have a book-like price. You have to reframe that. So that's kind of the first aspect, is just that comparison and contrast. So that's kind of item number one when it comes to price framing and price conditioning. Another really important piece of the puzzle that you can use to make people take action very quickly and make up essentially their mind and get them into kind of that purchasing state is the idea of opportunity cost. So number two is opportunity cost. And this is a big one. Our good friend Ray Higdon has a great quote. He likes to say sometimes, maybe not even sometimes, most of the time, free is the most expensive thing you can do, right? Because information these days, right, there's a lot of free information out there. There's a ton of free information. And you can actually, for free, get just about the same education that you get at an Ivy League university these days, right? Because all you have to do is go on to, Harvard and Yale, a lot of these Ivy League schools have so many of their courses available, not just online, but available like freely online. There's a whole catalog of very, very top tier education in all kinds of disciplines, from the humanities all the way into the hard sciences. I mean, you can go take Harvard physics right now for free, right? They have a whole site where you can go, you can watch lectures. You can do the same thing on iTunes. I believe they even provide you a lot of the materials. And there are a lot of sites right now that are actually trying to, kind of decentralize the whole educational process and offer really cost-effective educations and certificates all around the world, right? There are a lot of these sites now popping up. You kind of forget some of the names. I haven't looked at them too recently. But again, for a fraction of the price, you can get essentially the same kind of quality of education, and often you can get that kind of education for free. But the deal is, there's an opportunity cost with any purchase, right? So the idea is, if you want to chase down free information, yeah, exactly, Susan's got it. If you want to chase down free information, that's fine. It's there, you can find it. But really, what's the cost of that? There's an actual hard cost to your time, and maybe it takes you 10 times as long to track down exactly what you're looking for in a free situation as just paying for it, right? And so paying for it, sure, there is that expense right up front, but you really have to look at the value of your time and again, that opportunity cost. Like, so if you have certain goals that you want to achieve, what's the difference between achieving them in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, right? There's a big difference. And we all have kind of a finite amount of time on Earth here, right? And to do the things that we want to do, there's a very finite amount of time in a day. How do you want to spend that time? Do you want to spend it productively, or do you want to spend it chasing down information, right? So in a lot of contexts, and this is something that you can use with your prospects, the most effective thing to do is go ahead and purchase the information you're looking for. You might be paying a premium for it, of course, but overall, and this is kind of shifting into the final aspect of pricing and positioning I want to share with you, which is essentially the ROI. And this is huge, right? So, of course, on the one hand, again, number one was we want to kind of contextualize, we want to contrast and compare various offers and various, value propositions that are out there in the marketplace. Of course, we also want to look at essentially the opportunity cost of really efficiently and effectively receiving that information. And then 3, the ROI. And ROI is huge, okay? So what's and we can even go back to the traditional education, like what's the ROI of a traditional education? I can tell you, the ROI of my education was not a ton, right? Like I got, and again, I have no regrets. I'm not railing on higher education here, but I got an education in the humanities. That was not something from an ROI perspective where it's a very high ROI, right? Essentially what I'm qualified to do in that context was not a ton upon my graduation. Now that was a choice that I made intentionally, and I think it worked out fantastically. I'm actually quite happy with the things that I learned during that period of time. So no regrets there. And I've spoken with other people that are in the same boat. I've spoken with folks that did English or whatever else, right? And they're happy with their decision. But it does, again, that education doesn't really qualify you to do a lot, right? It doesn't really qualify you to make. You can of course teach. You can teach in high schools. You can teach at community colleges, and you have to get more education if you want to teach at university level. But you're not going to make a ton of money doing that, right? You're just not. Even in a lot of fields, even in a lot of the STEM fields. The practical application of that education doesn't necessarily set you up for a really high ROI. Matter of fact, we just published a blog post yesterday from someone who was an electrical engineering PhD who very, very smart, very successful academically, got the education, actually got a great job, was a university professor, and just found that lifestyle was not quite what she was looking for. It just wasn't quite the level of essentially the life that she was looking for. So again, the ROI on that education was just not there. Now, what's cool is, of course, in our industry, and whether you're in network marketing, direct selling, affiliate marketing, whatever you happen to be doing, there's a really high ROI in terms of cost of education and then potential upside, right? Like we can make significant leveraged income and revenue online, and that opportunity doesn't exist in a lot of contexts. So the ROI of the education that you would receive, say here at Elite Marketing Pro, is very, very high, right? Of course, there's a price associated, but the ROI is huge. And so those are kind of 3 primary ways that you can really position, because again, it's all about people. People walk around, they have all these associations with various offers, and they have this is true of anything. Like, you go into a Starbucks, right? You're going to pay a little bit more. You know what I mean? And you have an expectation. But if you went in and all of a sudden, like, the price was like doubled or tripled, you'd be like, well, there's no way I'm doing that, right? Because you just have a certain barometer. There's kind of like a certain realm in which you're comfortable spending on a particular item, right? Cars, we all kind of have like our general idea of like, here's how much a car should cost. This is true of like literally everything. A toaster oven, it's like everyone kind of has probably a schema is the term for how much a toaster oven is worth. What's the value of a toaster oven, right? People are probably willing to spend, $40, $50, right, on a toaster oven. But if it was like $1,000, it'd be like, hang on a second, this is way too much for a toaster oven. So that's a huge piece of the equation, is looking at the contrast and comparison aspect and the ROI aspect. And again, I mentioned the other one, which is opportunity cost. So again, those are the 3 things I wanted to share. I apologize for being a little bit all over the place today. I got a little discombobulated by my unsuccessful attempt to initially go live. But I hope you guys got some good value out of today's Daily Dose of Awesome. If you want to learn more about what we do here at Elite Marketing Pro, go to elitemarketingpro.com. You can actually check out, I mentioned that blog post that we just published yesterday. That's a fantastic one to check out. If you're someone who spent a lot of money on your education and you're not quite having the lifestyle that you're looking for, that's another great example, and you can see how that individual went about kind of making a pivot and shifting and getting into network marketing and being very, very successful doing so. So it's a really inspiring story. Definitely recommend you check it out. You can go to elitemarketingpro.com/blog and learn more. And with that, I hope you have a fantastic day, everyone, and we'll see you next time.